Okay, nepsy was originally published in 1998, so it was time to renorm and look at some of the areas where we felt we needed to add some things to nepsy to increase floors and ceilings, lower floors and increase ceilings. And to look at some of the pieces that have come up in the research so much in the last 10 years, social perception for one, the executive functions being another area where we've become very aware of how much of a role executive functions play for children, where previously we might have looked at the executive functions as something that really didn't begin developing until they're 11, 12. We now realize that executive functions are underlying everything they do and that they begin to develop quite early. And so there were also some tests that we felt were probably not sensitive enough, and maybe we needed to just drop a couple of those. There were some issues where it was difficult administration, the auditory attention being one, because it was a very executive function task for the examiner, because there was so much recording and listening and looking, and so we needed to make that a simpler process. So we went back and started in and looked at each test individually and what needed to be changed. Some we made no changes on at all, in particular the motor assessments. Others we, as I say, dropped. We dropped visual attention because it was never very sensitive, and the more we worked with it, we found that we still were not getting a very sensitive test. So we decided to work at that in a different way, with more of the executive functions tests and attention in the auditory attention, which was very sensitive. And so that's how we began, and it took us 10 years to develop the original nepsy, but I think we managed the revision in 4. So, and we feel pretty good about it. It seems to be addressing the underlying questions that we have about what's going wrong for kids, and that we don't reach with a cognitive assessment or an achievement assessment, because this makes it possible to look at underlying processes and break them down. The thing about the Lurian approach is you're looking at a child's functioning as if it were a complex process, and then you try to break apart the pieces of that process and look at the primary difficulty and then maybe secondary deficits that come from that. And so neuropsychological testing has a different approach than does cognitive assessment. What you're looking at with neuropsychological assessment in children is really a very skewed population, because you know that they're going to be, that most of these things the normally developing kid can do very well, but then there's going to be this smaller segment of the population that is the one you're looking at, that is going to have trouble, and that's where you want to be focusing your testing.